Thanks everyone for attending today. I'm really excited to get a chance to speak with you. Culture, and especially remote culture, is something that's really important to me, and so I'm really excited to hear what y'all have to say. I think it would be good for us to just go around the room and sort of start off with some introductions.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya. I don't want to really pronounce my second name. It's not easy for most folks, but I work with PageDuty. I'm based out of Toronto, and I joined PageDuty in the middle of this pandemic, so which means I have been remote since the day I've joined. And I handle 3 teams here, and I'm the senior product manager at PageDuty.
Awesome, thank you so much. Karishma?
Sure. Hi, I'm Karishma. I'm a group product manager at LaunchDarkly. For those of you who may not know what LaunchDarkly does, we help our customers control and deliver their software. I'm kind of in an interesting space right now where as a group product manager, I manage a small team of product managers in a coach-like capacity. But then I also have my own small team of amazingly talented engineers that I work with to build some really cool projects, specifically around automated workflows right now. And then, of course, I'm part of the PM team. So yeah, that's my team.
Awesome, thank you. Lina?
Lena Reinhardt, I'm VP Product Engineering at CircleCI, and I run a 100 people organization, currently 13 teams. We're growing really fast. We've been distributed from the start, but even with that, had some things to work on over the last year. And yeah, I'm responsible for many of our directly customer facing aspects of our product, from the user interface to running pipelines to data insights.
Thank you. And Loretta?
Cool, thanks. I'm glad to be joining as well. My name is Loretta Stokes. I'm a director of engineering at Eventbrite out of Nashville. Eventbrite, if you're not familiar with it, is a ticketing and event platform, self-service for anyone that wants to create their own live experience and remote Zoom today. Additionally, the teams that I have are responsible for product development, and I have teams across North America and in Spain.
Awesome, thank you. My name is James Thigpen, Director of Engineering here at Gremlin. Happy to be, part of this event. And my teams are responsible for, it's a product engineering team, so the Gremlin product itself. It's a small team, but we're growing as well. So what we're talking about today, the prompt for us is the most successful organizations are the ones that embrace change and use it to become stronger and resilient. We want to talk to y'all about sort of your experience over the past year. 2020 was obviously a very, difficult and challenging time. And so we want to understand how your organizations have sort of grown over the past year, grown and changed and evolved. And to start that off with, I'd love to just kind of, in general, like, how did last year's events affect your team? What sort of changes, adaptations did y'all have to make in order to, keep being successful?
Yeah, I can kick that off. So it's actually pretty funny. I was within the small group of people who went into work every single day till it was physically impossible to go in anymore. And I hoped it'd be over soon. At least that's what I expected. I was fortunate enough to work at LaunchDarkly in person and meet a lot of our amazing team members in person for a little over a year before we had to shift to being remote, as has everyone else. With LaunchDarkly, we've been fortunate to not have had layoffs, but it definitely impacted the scale at which we were hiring. As a company that's been in a hyper-growth phase, doubling our customers, doubling our employee size every year over the last 3 years, it definitely made us sort of slow down, be more purposeful about who we want to bring in, which roles we want to hire for, especially because you can continue hiring, but when we shifted to being remote, we wanted to help maintain stability and the existing team dynamics, just so folks on the team felt a little more emotionally secure and there wasn't a lot of change at the same time. We also introduced a few training options for folks about working remotely, and as someone who attended those trainings, I definitely learned a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that as well. As I mentioned, I joined in remote, and with just not joining remote, I have a Ukraine-based team, and I have a team that's based out of San Francisco as well. So it was a lot difficult for me to be completely remote and like working with 2 different country folks. But what really helped from our organization is they really helped us onboard remotely as much as possible. They helped us have those water cooler conversations as well through some applications that helped us adapt to the change. As you can imagine, someone joining in remote, not having met even a single person in the organization, might not feel that comfortable in like joining in and like just slacking people. So the teams helped us. They gave us a list of people that we need to go in and just set up some time with, so we just get familiar with the organization. They helped us also have these conversations with random folks across the org. So it was a tool that just randomly matched one of us with another person on a weekly basis. That was a major change that we had to adapt. And the second thing is, as most of you are in the same industry, we know that COVID is also one of the main reasons of digitization of a lot of organizations, which means anyone who's working on a digital platform has to ramp up really quickly to adapt the changes that our customers are going through. So while we are making a lot of fast changes to the product, we were being very mindful of each and every employee. So the organization helped us by giving us mental wellness days off so that we take some break, again, recharge ourselves, get some help if needed. They gave us some support in terms of having mental support as well as the physical support in terms of giving us COVID care packages and things like that. So that has really, really helped us adapt to the change as well.
I can echo what you just said about the customer impact. Like we've also seen that the changes last year pushed a lot of our customers and also other companies towards digitization in a way that I don't think would have been as fast if this hadn't happened. And that also pushed us, of course, to rethink. I mean, we've been a hybrid company basically from the start. We shut down offices very early on. We canceled our planned engineering all hands, the gathering of kind of the delivery organization, which we planned for April, and other kind of in-person gatherings that we would have normally done. I think one of the biggest shifts for me pretty early on was that we realized how much our ability to just plan had decreased. Like we've been in hypergrowth mode for a while. We've known how to work through a lot of internal changes, but then suddenly the amount of external changes that the teams were facing just increased vastly. And so we had to get to a much better place in terms of just better practices. Like it pushed us to really rethink how we operate as an organization in terms of getting to smaller increments of work, higher impact for the teams, getting things in front of our customers faster, especially because we were also seeing all these companies that were now struggling to really quickly digitize everything that they're doing while also still ordering laptops for their workforce. Like, I mean, it was a wild time. And getting to a place where we have much better visibility into our work, know what's working and what's not, and having much better metrics in place. I would say that was one of the bigger changes that we've seen.
Go ahead, Lorena.
For us, we really had to embrace remote work. I'll say that we had a very tight office culture, and embracing that, what we tried to do is kind of find those like work patterns that worked for everyone and having that flexibility in your work schedule. So as a company, and as some of the others that already echoed this, we have no meeting blocks. Because we started just having so many meetings back to back. The company had implemented something we call, this is my favorite thing that we've done, which was Bright Break Fridays. So for 6 months, 1 month, one day out of the month, we have like a no, it's a company holiday. So that's been the best thing, because I find people are not taking time off from work, or they feel like they can't if they're not going somewhere. And the other thing is what I've also seen with my different teams is they feel that lack of community, but I tried to talk to them about a community without walls. And we've thought about having a community where it's a physical place that we go to, but now that we don't have walls, we meet people out of other offices. And some of the fun things that we've done is we do trivia. And it's been a really fun way to get people together. My engineering teams like to play Among Us, and that's a popular online game. And then one of the other things we've done to bring people together is we've got kind of a comedy sketch show that we call the Too Bright Show. And so we have people that come and host the show and bring in guests, and we do like funny segments. And that kind of helps us have a way to communicate and connect together that doesn't feel like we're necessarily having to work. But at the end of the day, it's making a trusting work environment and giving people the flexibility that they need.
I like that a lot. I'm really curious what everybody else is doing for some of those kind of team event sort of things. They're so much more difficult to do now remotely, but there's also there's a great wealth of options out there if you can kind of embrace them. So I'm curious what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I can probably answer that from what we are doing, because there's a lot of things I believe is echoing what even Loretta said. We do have these fun events that we set with our teams, like they're called as weekly socials. So that's like an hour where everyone comes in, we figure out what we want to do. So we play, I believe, amongst us, and a lot of other fun games, so get to know people. We also, from company level, also they do a lot of events such as like virtual bartending or virtual pancaking making sessions. We all get on a Zoom, make pancakes. Not everyone's turns out that good, but we try. And we have a lot of events that are being organized at a company level that helps us reconvene as a team and not always just meet each other for meetings, because I personally have really hit the level of Zoom fatigue as much as I can. So I'm sure most people are at the verge. So we try to help them out of it, so to make it a little bit more fun to work with. So we do virtual mystery room games, things like that. So that has really helped the team reimagine the social events that we used to do in the physical world, right? So we used to go do monthly meetings or quarterly outings. So those things are now being moved into virtual events where we still have a lot of fun events to go to.
Thanks, Divya. All I can think of now are pancakes. So echoing off what Divya said, I remember we were actually scheduled to have a team offsite about 2 months after we had to go remote. And so we kept the team offsite, but instead we mailed these little woodworking kits to everyone. And it was a really cool exercise. I wish I could remember the name of the organization that helped coordinate this, but it was really cool just watching everyone struggle on Zoom together. Someone was like, you know what, I'm handing this to my kid and just having them figure it out for me. It's way too complicated. I think one of the things I like the most about how we've adapted or how we've modified being remote to maintain that social aspect. And it's a team secret, but I'm going to share it with you all. It's also something I did previously with my team at New Relic. And that's primarily, we set up a Slack bot. So we set up a private channel. By default, all of our channels are public. Our team channels, project channels, everything's public in Slack. But we set up a private team channel just for our little squad. And every day at a different time, every day between 9 and 5 PST, Slackbot pings us and says, share a picture of what you're up to. And the idea is it's a poor substitute for looking over and checking on someone at their desk and seeing what they're up to. Are they at their desk or not? And it's been interesting how initially people were like, oh, I'm responding to an email, or, oh, I'm definitely 100% working. And then a week in, people were like, yeah, I haven't opened my laptop all day, homeschooling my kid, or hey, I'm baking bread. It's my quarantine therapy hobby. So it's actually a pretty inexpensive and automated way to see what everyone's up to, what everyone's doing. And of course, it's optional, but folks have been sharing a lot more about what they're up to. And that's been a really cool way to stay in touch with each other and maintain the social aspect.
Yeah, so we're globally distributed, so we also had to rely on a lot of asynchronous things. So I would say that the social channels in our chat have skyrocketed since this So food channel, I think the latest edition is Star Trek and Star Wars. But we also did a few gatherings. So we had one, for example, where we'd explicitly ask people to bring their children to work in a Zoom, and the kids got to meet and hang out together, which I think was a lot of fun. One other team, unfortunately not us, but I'm still jealous, they had a sloth join their meeting because there is a rescue organization that will basically bring a sloth into the Zoom for a couple minutes that says hi. It was a really, really great surprise and really amazed everyone. I also think we have, one other factor for us is that we have a lot of teams who don't necessarily want to socialize a lot. I think especially over the course of the last year, someone mentioned Zoom fatigue already, that got very real. And so we also put a bit more work into basically using like regular team activities that we do anyway to give people more space to build relationships instead of adding other things, just because the needs are so different. We have a lot of different cultures where like people just have different needs, of course. And so making different use of retrospectives, mixing up formats there. We also put a lot of work into the onboarding and more kind of relationship building aspects than we probably would have done in the past. So kind of figuring out a good mix, and in the end, what works for each team.
Loretta, I saw you go off mute for a second.
Yeah, I was gonna add on I like the idea of the pictures and what you're doing now. I think the closest thing that one of my team does is when they're having lunch, they put all caps what they're eating. They're like screaming out what they're having to eat, and then of course each one of them will either, you know, tease them about if they're eating something nice, you know, they'll say a comment about it. If you're not having something very, you know, that's very healthy or whatever, they may, you know, rib each other about it. So that's been it's like some team norms that people are picking up during this time, and that's been one of the interesting ones that I've seen.
I'm still catching up on an 85 thread message or 85 message thread on Slack about whether potato salad and macaroni salads should be considered salads.
And in our, I believe, Lina, you mentioned you had a slot. So our organization had a cat channel, and everyone got their cats to a Zoom, and the cats had a Zoom meeting. So it's for cat lovers to have a cat Zoom meeting. I'm really interested to know what they spoke about, but I think even what Loretta said, people post this question of the day, really random questions, if like, which superhero would you be for a day? And like, what is the scariest movie you've watched? So I'm still going through the list of scariest movies that they have posted. And I'm definitely binging on a lot of Netflix as well.
That's awesome. One of my favorite things we did at Gremlin and Slack was there's a channel that's only for all caps typing. So it's just like constant yelling about, you know, whatever is going on. One of the topics that was mentioned, you know, was supporting employees that are having to do homeschooling, that are having to sort of, you know, adapt to COVID that has like impacted their lives and in really dramatic ways. And I'm curious, like, you know, have there been any kind of creative solutions that y'all have had to come up with for some of those employees to be able to support them through, you know, just this massive upheaval?
Yeah, I can probably kickstart like one of the things that we at PageDuty help is that let everyone have a flexible timing. So we had employees who did not work in the mornings because they were like doing homeschooling for their kids, versus some who started early because their partner was taking care of their kids in the morning, and they used to do, I think it's called as daddy duty or mommy duty here, because it's just playing fun with the duty words. And then they go in and post saying that, hey, I'm on daddy duty from so-and-so time to so-and-so time. So please expect delayed responses or I will not be available. And everyone respects that time. So I think one thing it is really necessary to survive this time is to be very, very conscious of everyone's personal life, kind of muddled up with their work life. And every employee is being conscious of that and respectful of that as well. So that kind of helps everyone manage their own personal situations accordingly, because each one has different. One of my team members had 2 small kids. So they were like 1 and 3-year-olds. And it is definitely not easy working and having meetings and having to take care of 2 kids who just wouldn't understand what a Zoom meeting is. So we need to be okay with kids crying in the background. And I think that's one thing that we all have become used to. And I personally have a lot of toddler friends right now.
Yeah, what we've done is the flexibility. That's definitely kind of number one thing. People can take the time that they need, block off time. We have instituted as a company, like if somebody needs to work part-time, that was an option. And then the other things is a lot of my people now have met my children. So I've got a 10-year-old that got incredibly bored there for a while. So we encourage, like, you don't apologize if your kid like comes in on your Zoom meeting. You bring them in, you introduce them, have them say a few words, or do what you need. I've seen kids I've seen some of our coworkers are bouncing a baby on their knee, and it's totally acceptable to do that. It's more of like smaller kids, but if they need time to take care of their kids for school, we provide that flexibility for it.
I'd like to echo what Loretta said. It's more, I think you struck a really good chord there, that it's not really about how the organization's perceiving the employees' productivity. It's more about how they are perceiving their own productivity. That's something we noticed very soon, as soon as we shifted remote, because folks would show up on Zoom meetings and be like, I'm so sorry, my kids are going to be in the back, or I'm so sorry, there might be some noise. And it's like, hey, don't be sorry. We're all living at work, basically. So as part of that, one of the things we've continued to reiterate on and re-emphasize in every all hands meeting is one of our values. And as opposed to it being work-life balance, it's actually work is not life. And we keep telling each other, we're like, hey, we're doing a bunch of really important stuff, but you know what? If you're offline for a day, no one's gonna die. And this resonates in when our co-founder, John Kodamal, when he was actually building Launch Darkly with Edith, our CEO and co-founder, he had a little infant, and I think he had a second one on the way. And so since day one, he's instituted, hey, this is how I did it. I sometimes work like 4-hour days. I sometimes like work like late night hours. So it's all about like balancing things and realizing that work isn't life.
Yeah, I think for us, it's been a lot about that flexibility too. Like we basically leaned much harder into async work, just because we've always had this distribution, but it's also meant that like many parents just couldn't plan anymore. We've had so many cases of just, well, daycare just shut down. Well, so here's the plan for the day gone out the window. And that's completely understandable. And we've had many folks who then would work late night hours. And with that, basically kind of moved to entirely different time zones than they'd been in. So a lot more kind of also removing meetings because so many folks had just been emotionally spent. I think the toll that this took really showed. And so trying to really limit the number of times that people have to have FaceTime with others, and instead trying to use more async collaboration modes, even when it comes to pair programming practices and other things that we've done quite routinely in the past, and just making up that space or creating that space for people to just basically do what they need to take care of, because nobody could really plan anymore. And making sure that they are able to do the best for themselves, for their families, and still basically contribute to the team in whatever way is possible, even though that was very limited for some folks, understandably.
I really like there's sort of a theme across a lot of these answers that is, normalizing those interactions, like normalizing that, like, hey, here's the kids, here's the dogs, the dogs are barking. That's my version of the world there. And there's a role that senior leadership plays there too, when the CEO is on the Zoom and his kids are crawling all over him. That really shows that, like, hey, this is the norm, and this is okay for everyone. Lina, you mentioned really digging into async work because of a global team. I'm curious, how have other people sort of adapted their processes to this new remote world that we're in?
For us, I think we've always had a heavy bias towards documenting things for knowledge share, and we've doubled down on that. So I think one of the very common traps I fell into when we shifted to working remotely was I thought if I wasn't on a Zoom meeting, I wasn't working. And that led to Zoom fatigue pretty fast. And that also kind of bled into the way we develop product. It didn't really, but it could have, in that I could have fallen into what's known as the build trap, where I think that I just need to ship. Like we can't slow down the rate at which we're shipping features, or we're shipping improvements or enhancements or fixing things. And that's just not, like, things need to adapt to the current, our work style needs to adapt to the current state of the world and the way things are and the things that are available to us. And so we went back as a team and we talked about our meetings, our communication style, what we expect. And we actually introduced some shifts in processes where it was like, cool, Karishma, as the PM, can you write these things down and then schedule a meeting where you walk the team through it, and we as a team can discuss and provide feedback and move on from there. Whereas in a non-remote world, I would have just scheduled a meeting and like vomited my thoughts in the meeting. But now you got to accommodate for everyone. And so some people want pre-reading material, some people want to, attend a Zoom meeting and then document their thoughts asynchronously offline. And you have to be able to adapt to each of those things. So just over communicating by documenting and revisiting our existing team processes and meetings was helpful.
Pretty similar thing that we also did at PageDuty. We had our recent CPO who came from Amazon, and they had this best practice called as PR FAQs. They have this FAQ format for everything. So I'm sure most of you must have also had in the early lockdown days where you're trying to get into a meeting with 20 slides and you don't even cross the second or third slide, right? Because everyone is having an opinion on the first or second slide itself. So essentially that meeting has not given any outcome. So he came and he brought some of the best practices that has been really useful in Amazon and effective as well. There's an FAQ document where you write down everything anyone might ask in your meeting, on what context you're trying to set and what questions that they might have, answer it. So, and then send the document earlier. And only if we need a meeting, we used to get into a meeting. Otherwise, we used to do async commenting on the document. Someone asked me, hey, what is this? I answered it on the document. It's 2 minutes job, it's done. It's not me having 20 minutes or 30 minutes of blocks of Zoom meetings. And I think that's something that we are now trying to set as a process in the organization as well. Do not go in with the intent to have a meeting, go in with the intent to have an outcome out of the meeting. So that kind of helps everyone restructure the way they are thinking of the way they are working, and then ensuring that everyone stays communicated and informed of what's happening.
I'll add one more point to that. I do agree with the documenting pre-reads, asynchronous as much as possible. But one thing I've had to learn kind of through this is it's kind of the first time I've led teams globally, and really thinking about how information and communication travels. There's sometimes like we leverage Slack and it's easy to kind of miss certain things in Slack. So I've taken more opportunities to over communicate. So I'm like, hey, I'll send an email. I was like, I know they'll get this in the morning. I'm like, in case you missed this, I just want to reiterate, this is some things that I want you to look at as a pre-read, or vice versa. If something kind of comes out at a weird time, that I'm being mindful of like the different time zones and when that will land, or just taking one more opportunity to over communicate.
I think for us, the kind of communicating conclusively across time zones is really important, like in a way that basically allows people to act instead of having to go back and forth. I think that can be quite a shift. From a process perspective, beyond that, we worked a lot to basically decrease coordination overhead. Like I would say, looking at the last year, we made a lot of process improvements that should have happened anyway, but I think the changes forced us to expedite them. So for example, the onboarding process, like really honing in on helping people build relationships early on, because they're probably not going to see their teammates anytime soon. And similar for incident response work or our development process overall, like streamlining things, making much clearer what roles and responsibilities are, because just the amount of ambiguity that teams had to deal with was so large anyway. And the more we could kind of narrow that down, the better for people just to understand what they are dealing with and what is expected of them. And with that, also moving to much more asynchronous planning. For example, our quarterly planning had relied a lot on just OKR meetings, and making that process basically based on a spreadsheet with a lot of comments. Not great, but we're still working on optimizing it. It at least was a step in the right direction. There's still more work to do.
So I have a question for Loretta. You mentioned it being easy to miss things in Slack. I'm curious if, as part of having to over-document things just to make sure that things are written down, you've also noticed a change in the communication style, the way things are documented, just because there is a discrepancy between verbal communication and written communication. And written communication just leaves so much more open room for like a misinterpretation of the intent. So do you have any thoughts around that? Have you noticed a shift there?
I guess the first thing I try to look to see if it's been missed. And then the other thing is to follow. Whenever it's like critical things, then I usually follow up, especially with managers. There's, one thing even came up today, just talking about what's coming up in our HR process. And there was some things that were communicated kind of differently, and I had to like separate them, like, okay, we're gonna go through this process right now and kind of work with me. And this was documented this way, and then providing clarity of like, here's what we're gonna do coming up in a couple of weeks. So sometimes like whenever somebody loses the context, or maybe they get a message in a different order, it can create some confusion. So I usually just follow up and make sure I'm like, hey guys, I just want to make sure you understood this. If you have any other questions, and then just provide clarity, because sometimes it can easily happen when somebody's out, or just things kind of arrive in a different order.
I'm curious, have you all started to think about what changes and adaptations that you put in place to deal with the past year that you plan on keeping as we move into some new form of normal?
So I've been thinking a lot about an article that Blair Braverman wrote a while ago about working. She's a musher, like a human sled dog driver, and she wrote about basically planning for the work with her sled dogs and how they navigate being out in the wild. And she wrote that if you don't know how far you're going, you need to plan that you're going forever. And I've been thinking a lot about that over the last year, like basically moving to smaller increments of work, higher impact for the teams, faster, getting things in front of customers very quickly, knowing very early what works versus what doesn't. And so when we start work, having the right metrics in place to be able to do that. And then really like having teams and an organization overall that's resilient to change. And that's not just able to be flexible and manage that change, but then ultimately, ideally also gets to a place where they're able to drive change and not just respond to it. And that's a lot of the things that came out of the last year in terms of just our understanding of shaping teams and the organization overall. And I think it's been, I wish we wouldn't have had to learn the lesson this way, but it's definitely one that I'm going to take forward for us.
I think for us, actually, I didn't mention what PageDuty does. So we are actually an incident response mobilization platform. So which means that we are essentially helping a lot of organizations manage their incident response a lot better, right? So we are actually having the cake and eating it too. So we are learning a lot of things with respect to our product as well as our process. Because in the past, we have been used to people walking into our desk and interrupting our work. We are okay to just stop whatever we're doing and then help someone. So we are trying to stop those processes, because we have learned in this pandemic that we often get interrupted so much at our work that we are not aware of it. And we have seen folks having difficulty in context switching and reducing the Slack overkill. I'm not sure if others have seen this. We are overusing Slack to the point I wanted to uninstall the application on my laptop, right? So it's a noise that you cannot shut. So trying to reduce the noise that we have through these Slack communications, how can we channelize these interruptions that come to our teams, helping them focus better? So that's one of the things that we have identified as a big pain point that always existed, just became more obvious during this lockdown, right? So we are trying to take those processes and streamline it. And more importantly, now we are being more mindful of how we define what we do as a team. So instead of, I believe, I completely concur what Lina said. Try to identify, okay, what are small chunks of work that we can deliver as a team? How do we work backwards? So instead of us trying to move towards a goal, say, okay, this is the goal, and then start working backwards and saying, okay, how can we achieve it as a team? So that makes things a little bit more realistic as a team as well, in like setting goals for ourselves. And some of the other process internally as well as a team of how we manage ourselves and how we communicate, and things that we have standardized in this time are things that we definitely want to carry forward, like have no meeting days, have lesser presentations, have more stronger communications through documentation, instead of us having to do whiteboarding. In the past, we were always fascinated with whiteboards. Any problem, we used to go walk to a whiteboard and say, let's start finding solutions. It's not necessary. We have been working in this remotely. That means it will work in the future as well.
I think for us, it'll be just fully embracing remote work. Again, kind of coming back to our very strong office culture, which I think we will still, like as our offices open up, we will still have. But that flexibility that we've been able to give our teams and that trusting environment, I think that will be something very big for us to carry forward.
Yeah, I think for me, everything everyone's resonated so far around over-documenting things, having no meeting blocks or even days. For us, it's Wednesday. And I think for me personally, I'm someone who relies a lot on like human connection and in-person communication as a product manager. And I'm like, you know what? I have 3 bullets. I'll just get 10 people in a room and inspire them and motivate them and communicate exactly what we want to build. And I can't rely on that anymore. So being better about my communication, my documentation, and being more purposeful about those things to accommodate for everyone's communication styles.
I completely agree with you, Karishma. Being a product manager myself, it's one of the most difficult changes that we are making. We famously call them expensive meetings because one of the highest paid folks are all brought into the same team. So that means it's a very expensive meeting, right? So they say, try and reduce how many folks you need in a meeting. So that's also a big change for us, where we always used to have big groups meeting together and then doing these 3-day workshops. Those things have gone away. And I think probably they're gone away for a long time now.
Thank you. Our no meeting days at Gremlin are also on Wednesdays. So we have some questions from attendees I'd like to swap over to now. The first is from Blake Scrivener, Director of Engineering Reliability in the US. In a blameless culture, how does one successfully hold teams accountable for their actions?
I would say that accountability and blamelessness aren't dichotomies. So I'm not trying to figure out if I got this the wrong way around either way. I think a lot starts with clear expectations. I also think, especially as any leader in the space, making sure that people understand direction, strategy, the very big picture of what you're trying to do is the foundation for them also being able to make the right decisions ultimately without having to be micromanaged, because I also think that's a pattern to avoid. But yeah, setting very clear expectations, clear goals, measurable goals that are measurable in increments, that can be really, really hard, but it's so important because it also prevents surprises. You don't want to have a team having to work on something for 3 months only then to basically land it at the end and then you know if it's worked or not. But again, it can be really difficult to embrace that. But I think it's a big leadership responsibility in the end. And then, yeah, not just reviewing with teams what went well, but also talking about what didn't go well, using regular retrospectives, reviewing larger projects or impact items that the team's been working on and objectives, and really learning from that. And I do think that can do a lot to really increase that accountability, and the visibility of progress is a really important part of that.
I couldn't agree more. I think the way I perceive it's the leadership's responsibility is when I find one of the PMs on my team about to do something that could lead to an error or a mistake, I'll usually point back to a time I made that mistake and I'll be like, oh, been there, done that. Here's what I learned from that mistake. And like, I want you to have the learning ahead of time, so you don't need to make that mistake. But that also comes with fostering a culture where we want to grow, where we want to learn, where we're comfortable admitting to our failures as much as we are our successes. And I think the best way to set the example for that culture is for leadership to do it. So every time I'm put in front of a team, I have a long list of my failures and learnings, and then a short list of successes that I want to communicate.
I think I agree to both of your points. I think embracing failures as much as successes, and as well as letting people have that autonomy to make their own decisions and then learning from it kind of helps everyone be accountable and responsible for what they're delivering. I think that is one of the things that our leaders and I also try to do with the team is saying, hey, this is what you need to do. I'm sure you know to do it the best. I don't want to do or handhold you in everything. But if you're not able to get there, at least let me know. So we are all working together as a team and helping achieve that. So that way, no one feels scared to speak up when they're not able to achieve their goal or their deliverables.
Yeah, I'll add one more point to everything that has been said so far. It's like we're very collaborative in addition to the learning aspect. Is like we always want to like look at something happens, like let's learn from it and improve. But I think we also have a good sense of like if somebody's struggling, like let's work together. Like I see that we're maybe not going to make this. Like how can I help? Let's figure out a solution together versus having someone feel like they're out on their own. But at the same time, you know, we have clear expectations on, you know, that we want to meet anything that we've committed to, but we try to look for ways that we can help.
The next question I have is from Alan Schoen, Systems Engineering Lead in Australia and a speaker at last year's Failover Conf.
G'day, I'm Alan Schoen from Sydney, Australia, and my question is, as you grow and scale your organisation, how do you promote and embed a culture of ownership amongst a cross-functional subset of your people?
One of the ways that we have tried is go through the RACI matrix and then have everyone have different parts of the things that they own. So everyone feels empowered, and that we have personally seen has been really successful with the teams is because they feel like they are not just contributing, they are owning parts of it, and then they have that ability to deliver more value than they were in the past. So that kind of helps people have that ownership driven approach. And in a cross-functional world as well, it's necessary for us to set expectations of what areas is owned by different functional roles. So no one is stepping on each other's toes. At the same time, if you want to really contribute, you are in that contributing C and I options, which means that I have the ability to come in and give inputs, be part of the team. At the same time, it's not your decision to make. Please be aware of it. So everyone feels it's more easier to have that visibility across the organization, who owns what, and does not really have any kind of discussions or misinterpretations as well.
Another approach that we've been using is basically been metrics-centered. So having very clear ownership for the teams of the metrics that they own between SLOs, SLIs, business KPIs, and having really clearly defined areas on that. And the other aspect I would add to that is basically focusing on outcomes instead of approaches with teams, like setting objectives around the impact that they're looking to have, ideally connected with those KPIs or with the SLIs, SLOs that they have. And with that, basically giving the teams or creating space for the teams to develop how exactly they're going to approach that. It also really helps foster more creativity and in the end, really embrace what the team is driving, because it also allows people to contribute no matter which role they're on and no matter which aspect basically they're driving themselves as part of that.
I'll add to what you just said. I think autonomy is also an important aspect of ownership, is giving the teams like a goal or a problem to solve and giving them the opportunity to pave the pathway on how they want to solve it. I definitely agree with what you said.
At LaunchDarkly, I think the way we achieve that is our fundamental team structure for projects is working in a triad structure, which includes a PM lead, a designer, and an eng lead. When I say eng lead, you're probably thinking eng manager, but in this case, we actually go around and rotate the eng lead who's part of the triad on different projects, and we let people opt in to be the project lead or eng lead or be part of that triad for a specific project that they're passionate about. And I think that's really helped people feel a sense of ownership, feel like we truly care about autonomy, which we really do, and also feel and also implicitly like create a sense of accountability, because you're now responsible for leading this project and all of the engineering decisions that need to be made, of course, in conjunction with your PM and design counterparts, but still.
We have a similar structure here of sort of the rotating lead. We call them the project shepherd, and sort of each new big project kind of, it's a great way to sort of establish that ownership, like, you know, deep down. It's been really effective. All right, so I believe that's it. I would like to go around and see if anybody has any, you know, final parting words on culture as we, you know, enter the, hopefully the end of this past year's events and, you know, into the new world. Any inspiration from anyone?
Yeah, I just want to say that we should recognize that going remote first is an explicit trade-off, just as everything is. By going remote, we gain fantastic new teammates. We open ourselves to a whole new world of great talent to recruit from. And we learn how to scale as an organization. Of course, as we talked about, in some ways, it's more rushed than we would like, but still, we learn to scale as an organization. But we trade away the easy give and take of collaborating in a room together. As Divya pointed out, we can't all just walk to the same whiteboard. We have teammates that like draw something on a whiteboard and hold it up in a Zoom meeting. And we also lose some of the social connection that we so heavily rely on for a team's culture. So we lose a bit of the easy spread of what we call culture by osmosis. So we'll have to all be deliberate about that and work to counteract that. And I'm excited to see how that goes.
I think we started by talking about change, and I would just re-emphasize how much not just embracing change and responding to it, but also driving change and giving teams the structure and frameworks and opportunities to do that, how much that can help with scaling culture. Because I think culture especially is often underestimated because it feels like an intangible thing and something that's really hard to impact. But in the end, a culture is the behaviors that we reward and that we punish every day. And it's in all the actions that everyone on our team does. And so the more that everyone on the team is in a position to impact that culture, drive change forward as part of a team and a larger organization, the more I think we're enabling our teams to become better, and the more we're enabling our organizations to become resilient and ultimately really drive changes without just responding to it. And I think that in itself is going to be a huge advantage for teams and organizations going forward.
Yeah, and I think in addition to what they have already spoken, I think one of the key things is for us to, as humans, we are always resisting change, and I think we are still adapting to this change. And we need to embrace the fact that this might be the future for a few folks long term, and some might still come back to office but might not. So we all need to embrace the change that we need to work with a lot of remote folks. So be very mindful of it. And more importantly, I think this has given the opportunity for organizations at scale also to have that place to voice out their opinion of what is working well, what's not working well, what changes do they need to help them support in what they're going through, the tools and support they need from the organization to work more effectively. In the past, the process and organizational changes were always a top-down approach, but now it's become more and more easier to do a more flat structure where everyone can give out their opinions and take their opinions into consideration and feel more heard in the organization as well. And I think that's something that is a cultural shift as well that we are going through. And more and more we move into a part remote structure, I think this is going to help us settle ourselves better. And like Karishma said, this opens up opportunities to having more talented folks come in, have more distributed teams, not just located to 3 or 4 cities. So you can have more people support your organization to grow and scale much faster.
And to add what's already been said, I'm definitely, we've been able to find very talented people that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to find. And other things that I'll take forward is like that consistent and constant communication that I think as a company that we've really fostered in a different way, being just open and transparent and acknowledging at times whenever people have been burnt out or one person that used to work with us, they would ask, how are you really? Because sometimes people will say, I'm fine, I'm nice, but to really dig into how people are really doing and understanding that we need to just foster balance between our work life and our home life. I think that's important to take as we go forward. And the one thing I'll take away from what I've learned from you all is I'm definitely going to take the pancake idea. I love that one. And just being able to make sure that we take time to do fun things because we spend a lot of time together as we're with our people that we work with. And we don't get as much of that chance to be social when we're not in the office.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of time that we spend, in these relationships that are our coworkers. It is a significant time investment. I like that a lot. All right, well, thanks everyone so much, Divya, Loretta, Karishma, Lina. I really appreciate your time today. This has been just a wonderful conversation. I would love to just keep talking about this, but we are up on our time. So thank you so much.